Hi, I'm Chef Meg Galvin, and today for your Spark recipe makeover is sun-dried chicken with 20 clove garlic. And immediately you're going to be like, oh gosh, that's a lot of garlic, but it's not, because we're going to just caramelize this garlic, and when garlic cooks it gets really sweet. So what I did is I picked up 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken breast, cut off the fat, and then I'm taking that and just slicing it down into smaller portions. And I have a saute pan, which is just a flat-sided pan with sloping edges, and I'm going to get that a little warm. So you're going to need to preheat your oven to about 325 degrees. Now, from a nutritional standpoint, you're looking at 4 ounces of raw meat that then becomes 3 ounces of cooked meat. So we're going to need a little bit of oil in the pan. So be real careful when you measure your oil. You don't want to go too much. We're going to go 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You don't want to use an extra virgin olive oil, just a basic olive oil or canola oil, and make sure you just get that pan nice and hot. Now the technique that we're going to start with is called sautéing, which means to jump, and it's high heat and minimal fat, so that's why it's great for this recipe. Now we're going to start with some garlic. So I've just peeled and taken off the ends of some garlic, and you need to mince the garlic or crush, or one of my favorite things to do is just take it and grate it. You can use a microplane or one of these flat little graters. Actually, I have a microplane. And just get that garlic in. Now, this initial garlic, we're just going to take a couple cloves and grate it down just to kind of get it going. Be very careful because it will burn. So you just want to watch it. Now, this is all going to cook down, so if you get some little larger chunks, that's okay. So I can hear it sizzling, and that's what we want. That's this method of sautéing. So 1 pound boneless, skinless chicken breast, and then we have the 2 garlic cloves in there now. So we're just going to move that around. Now your chicken, you want to make sure you wash it and then pat it dry. When you are sautéing, you're taking something and putting it in hot fat. And if you still had some water left on the chicken, it's a little bit of a hazard, especially if you have children around in the kitchen, because it can splatter. That water splatters. So we're just going to take this. We kind of have some different cuts on it. That's okay. So the finer you cut it down, like these strips are going to cook a little bit quicker than these larger pieces. Now, chicken is great. A lot of people are very afraid of it, and people say, what are you doing touching that chicken with your hands? Well, it's okay, because I'm going to wash my hands. What's happening now is the proteins are starting to coagulate, and the chicken at this point, if I tried to move it, it's going to say, don't move me. So now this board and knife had raw chicken, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it off because we're going to do a little bit more work while that's going. So make sure you wash your hands, wash your knives, and that's called cross-contamination if you happen to get a raw protein in with your other ingredients. So I've peeled the other 18 cloves of garlic, and then we're going to need some onion. So I'm just using a white onion, and I took it, and since this was a large one, topped and tailed it, cut it in half, and then we're going to cut it into nice little strips. So fingers over, thumb tucked in, and you're just slicing. Now what's going to happen is the onion, like the garlic, is going to cook down. They both have some sugars in them, and those are going to caramelize. And so that's what's going to provide you with a lot of the flavor for the dish. The other component that's going to provide the flavor are some sun-dried tomatoes. So one nutritional tip is don't buy them packed in oil. You want them just dried, and we're going to rehydrate them in the pan. Now we're starting with this sautéing method, but eventually what we're going to do is more of a braising method, because we're going to take this and we're going to put a tight-fitting lid on. If you don't have a lid for a pan like this, you can always just use aluminum foil. They see how they're hesitating, so they're just telling me, don't turn me. So I'm going to hold off on that. So let's talk about these tomatoes. Now, there's a product called Tomato Toss, and they're these great little tomatoes. Let me show you how tiny. They're just teeny tiny little tomatoes, or you can get the halves of sun-dried tomatoes. If you're not real experienced in the kitchen, cutting these can be, my knife's very sharp, but it can kind of be a little bit of a hazard. So this is a great time to bring the kids into the kitchen, get a pair of scissors, and they can just snip these sun-dried tomatoes. So that's something, give them something to do too, because you want your family with you while you're making all these great dishes. So the chicken's just about there. All right, the chicken is caramelized now. We flipped it over, anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and add those 18 more cloves of garlic. We're going to get them in the pan and just kind of get those started while the bottom of the pan is caramelizing. Now, we can see at the bottom of the pan there's a little bit of sediment, and that's what we call fond, F-O-N-D, and that's the good stuff. So in a little bit, we're going to remove that from the bottom of the pan into the sauce. Oops, I had a little guy that got away from me. Okay, so chicken's going to come out just for a second. Remember, too, when you're dealing with raw poultry items, in the beginning, when you flip the chicken, go ahead and wash your tongs, because you don't want to cross-contaminate. So we have the garlic working in the pan, and then I'm going to go ahead and add those sliced onions. So we want to hear that searing, and what that is, that's the pan talking to us, saying this is going to be good. Now, we were sauteing, and now we're going to change that technique to a little bit of a braising technique. So the tomatoes are going to go in. So those were dried, so now we need to rehydrate them. So I'm just going to give them a little bit of a stir. Now that fond, I'm going to get it so that you can really see this. We need to get that up. One option would be white wine. Don't feel like you need to go out and buy a whole bottle of white wine for this. But if you have some in the kitchen, what you can do, turn the heat down on your pan just a little bit too, because this is alcohol. And it could, it's very low in alcohol, but it could ignite. So you see how that, and just the aroma is amazing that this brings out. And so what you're doing too, it's a little bit of self-cleaning on your pan, so it won't be as hard to clean a little bit later on. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water. So I'm really working that around, trying to get those onions just kind of going. You can see the caramelization's happening on the garlic. So we built this little bed for our chicken. So now we're going to put the chicken right on top of those. So remember, this is enough servings for 4, so this is a lot of food, a lot of flavor. So that's going to go in. And then what we're going to do, since it is chicken, we don't want to use a black pepper. We're just going to give a little pinch of white pepper, and then for some more flavor, we're going to do some oregano. So we're going to do some dried oregano. So how you can release those flavors is just rub them between your hands, and you can just smell it kind of coming through. So now, since we're going to change to this braising technique, we need a little bit of moisture. And so what I've chosen is a low sodium chicken stock. And we're just going to use 3/4 cup. But here's where you need to play with the recipe a little bit. You want the stock to come, not cover the chicken, but just barely come up to. So you can always finish, if you don't want to add any more calories, you can always finish with a little bit of water and then tight-fitting lid in the oven for about 30 minutes, and when it comes out, it's going to be all caramelized and great. All right, 30 minutes in the oven, and we're going to pull this guy out. Just remember that if your handles don't get hot on the stove, they do in the oven, so don't burn your hands. So let's lift this off, and that looks great. Our sauce is reduced down. This is 260 calories per servings and just 9 grams of fat, but it's loaded with vegetables, it's loaded with protein. So what I like to do, we're going to go just 3 ounces of the protein. So we're going to take that, and then let's get in here and get all these garlics. It looks awesome. Really colorful. This would make a great dinner party menu because you get it together, you get it in the oven, and you can be with your guests while it's finishing. So 20 cloves sun-dried garlic chicken.